with Blücher is the record also of the intense, lifelong conversation of a marriage that, for two hunted fugitives, was a safe haven in dark times. It still seems to me unbelievable that I could achieve both a great love and a sense of identity with my own person, she wrote Blücher in 1937, in what is one of the most remarkable love letters of the 20th century. And yet I achieved the one only since I also have the other. I also now finally know what happiness is. The letters shed a fascinating light on her thinking and on some of the intimate feelings that went into the making of Eichmann in Jerusalem. "You were the only reader to understand what otherwise I have never admitted," she wrote Mary McCarthy, "namely, that I wrote this book in a curious state of euphoria." Like Arendt's biography, Rachel Varnhagen, The Life of a Jewish Woman, written before her emigration to the United States, Eichmann in Jerusalem was an intensely personal work. The writing helped give her relief from a heavy burden. As she wrote Mary McCarthy, it was a cura posterior, the delayed cure of a pain that weighed upon her as a Jew, a former Zionist, and a former German. The main thesis of Eichmann in Jerusalem was summed up, not very felicitously, in its subtitle. It is odd and sometimes mind-boggling to follow the overheated debates of 4 decades ago. Irving Howe claimed in his memoirs that the polemic in America was partly due to feelings of guilt, pervasive and unmanageable, yet seldom until then emerging into daylight. For this reason, Howe thought something good came out of the confrontation with Arendt. Some of the accusations voiced against the style and tone of the first version of her book, as published in The New Yorker, were well-founded and were excised in the book. For example, her description of Leo Beck as the Jewish Führer. Others were patently false. For example, it was claimed that Arendt had exonerated Eichmann but condemned the Jews. She had done nothing of the sort. Nor had she assaulted the entire court proceeding, as was frequently claimed. She only attacked the melodramatic rhetoric of the state prosecutor. She supported the death sentence as meted out by the court, but would have preferred a differently formulated verdict. Contrary to frequent accusations, she never questioned the legitimacy of a trial in Israel by Israeli judges. Nor did she, as was frequently maintained, make the victims responsible for their slaughter by their failure to resist. In fact, she bitterly attacked the state prosecutor who had dared make such a heartless claim. Still, this accusation even found its way into the Encyclopaedia Judaica. In a similar vein, she was falsely accused of having claimed that Eichmann was an enthusiastic convert to Zionism and even to Judaism. Hand-me-downs from one critic to another drew on alleged references in the book which no one seemed to have checked. The argument was by no means restricted to academic circles, but exercised young and old, historians, philosophers, journalists, as in the case of Grafton's father, priests of several faiths, atheists, community functionaries, and professional propagandists. The attacks were often intensely personal. Many published reviews were serious, meticulously documented, fair, and well-reasoned. Others were clannish, full of personal invective, and of a surprisingly hackneyed intellectual level of mean personal innuendo. The book undoubtedly seems less controversial now than 40 years ago, as new generations of scholars take a fresh, less partisan look also on Arendt's other writings on Jewish history, Israel, and Zionism. Eichmann in Jerusalem is best read today in conjunction with these other essays. Most were published long before Eichmann in publications, some of them now defunct, like Menorah Journal, the New York German-language refugee weekly Aufbau, the Review of Politics, the Jewish Frontier, and Jewish Social Studies. They spell out a conviction, which in Eichmann is for the most part only implied, that like other 19th-century nationalisms, Zionism had already outlived the conditions from which it emerged, and ran the risk of becoming, as Arendt once put it, a living ghost amid the ruins of our times. A decade or so earlier, she had still been an ardent disciple of the German Zionist leader Kurt Blumenfeld, the father of post-assimilationist Zionism, an advocate of compromise with the Palestinians, either territorial or through establishing a joint secular binational state. At the time of writing Eichmann in Jerusalem, she'd all but despaired of this, and bleakly foresaw decades of war and bloody Palestinian-Israeli clashes. In the 1930s,